Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 23 playthrough of the Kansas City Royals. We are at the beginning of the 2033 season, and simple goal for the Royals, win the championship this year, or ownership will be upset with us. So no pressure on the Royals as we begin this season. And it's been an interesting off-season for the Royals, probably less active than we typically are. Part of that is that we didn't have a ton of money when the off-season began. Did open up some money when Caleb Lagerwell, one of our longtime ace pitchers, opted out of his contract. He was due to make $18 million this year, had a player option on it, and he opted out. And we ended up re-signing him for a 6-year deal at $18 million a year for the next 5 years, and then a team option for the final season. So I think for a 30-year-old pitcher who's still normal injury proneness, pretty good pitching ratings, and just incredible consistency over the course of his career where, since he came to Kansas City, with the exception of that first season when he had a 3.07 ERA, he's been between a 3.46 and a 3.86 ERA every year, 114 ERA plus, 92 FIP minus for the course of his career. So very effective pitcher. Glad to have him back. Other than him, not a lot of new additions to the team. We did sign Matt Cronin. He was our one somewhat major free agent acquisition. Signed the lefty to a 1-year contract for $4.4 million. Think that he can be a pretty important arm out of our bullpen. And then we also picked up Edgar Manzo through the Rule 5 draft, and he ended up making the team. He's only been up for 2 days. He's a 32-year-old, pitched in one game with Houston at the end of last season, but thought that he was a worthwhile acquisition. And part of the reason he is on the team right now is that we have Jaden Woods and Sandy Gaston both on the IL. And Zach Jacobs has been banged up for a few days now with a sore back since the 19th, so he missed the last couple days of spring training. And his recovery time is now unknown. So we are actually going to, just in the interest of being incredibly conservative, place him on the IL right now. He'll be retroactive 3 days from now to the end of spring training. And in order to kind of fill that spot, we will we have a couple options. For the near term, we are going to bring Heiselberro up from AAA. He's been up and down a bit over the last couple of seasons, and he will fill in for us. And interestingly, that moves Tyler Bosma, who was our closer last season, back into the number 5 spot in the rotation. And then Cronin, who we had picked up, is going to move into the closer role, at least for the near term. One other thing going to do with the pitching before we get going. I don't normally get too involved in the waiver wire, but Jae Young Jang, starting pitcher, almost 31 years old, has only been up for 1 year and 151 days. I'm assuming he pitched in South Korea before he came to the U.S. 4 pitches, all of which except his changeup are above average. Decent stuff, really good movement, and acceptable control. Only making $1.9 million. Red Sox must be loaded, and they were in the World Series last year, but to give up a pitcher who basically in his first full year of Major League action had a 3.30 ERA and 120 strikeouts and 114 2/3 innings, we're going to go ahead and put a claim in on him. Team with you cannot afford the player contract, higher priority, or the original team pulled back. Let me just make sure. He's making 1.9. We don't have quite enough money for that right now, so we may need to tweak something. I would like to try to put that claim in. So I'm going to possibly come up with a master plan to be able to at least put that claim in. But before I do that, a couple other things I want to touch on. Went through the pitching staff. The lineup we really did nothing in free agency, quite honestly. The team this year, it's a youth movement for these Royals. We have 5 rookies on the team who should all be seeing some pretty significant playing time. Leo Aguilar is going to be our backup catcher. Rich Alvarado is going to be a utility infielder, and he's going to be our starting first baseman against lefties. Erageto Laziosi is going to be our starting second baseman. Tony Fonseca is going to be our starting shortstop. And then Ishmael Zavala is going to be DH against right-handers and right fielder against left-handers. So all of these guys are going to get some pretty significant playing time. And in addition to having 5 guys who are rookies on the team, you can see we've got 8 of our 13 players are making the major league minimum. So we've never really gone into a rebuild phase with these Royals, and I think our goal is to still be very competitive, but it's very interesting right now that we've got such a young team. Typically in the off seasons, we made I don't want to say huge splashes in free agency, but we've always looked to improve the team that way. And this year we just tried to do it organically and internally by bringing up some of the players that we've been investing in our farm system for the past several years. And speaking of that minor league system, we got the second-ranked system in baseball right now. The number 1 prospect in baseball, Maxime De La Cruz, who was a scouting discovery about a year and a half ago. Played him as a 17-year-old last year in rookie ball, and he held his own, hitting .251, did hit 7 homers and 271 at-bats. Don't really know what position he's ultimately going to play. He could play second, he could play third. He's not going to be particularly good at either of those. And then when you look at the outfield, he could be a corner outfielder, a left fielder, a right fielder is probably where he's going to end up. I don't think we'd want to be playing him on the infield every day, but if his contact, gap power, and home run power all develop as hoped, hopefully he will be making a difference for us a few years down the line. I also have Jorge Morales, who was our international free agency signing back in 2031, number 12 prospect in baseball. Just recently turned 18 years old. Still at the actually he's not at the international complex. We did move him up to the Royals Dominican team. So we'll see what he can do in the DSL. It looks like he's certainly ready for that level of action, even though he's only 18 years old. Bobby Cintrone, another rookie ball guy, and then Alvarado and Laziosi, who we already talked about on the Major League roster, round out our top 5 prospects and our 5 players among the top 100 in this system. And a couple other things we want to do before the season gets underway. Check in on a couple of the former Royals who we've either traded away or let go through free agency over the past couple years. Former ace pitcher Spencer Bauer signed a big deal with the Braves a couple years ago. He was 11-10 last year with a 5.04 ERA. He did strike out 238 batters in 175 innings, put up a 3.6 WAR, and his SIERA was 3.06. So he is still a pretty effective pitcher. We let MJ Melendez go, who was our longtime catcher, and he had a rough year with Toronto. Only positive thing you can say, he did hit 22 home runs in those 431 at-bats, but he hit just a .186. His OPS plus and his WRC plus, both well below average. And he's still going to be making $13.3 million a year for the next 2 years before a potential vesting option can can knock in. So looks like it was a good move to move on from him. Sal Frelick is a longtime player who we traded away to the Yankees before last season. He's been wrecked physically and making decent money, although this is his last year at $9 million, and then some team options that will most likely be rejected kick in. Hit only .248 for the Yankees last year, and actually was not even that active on the base paths with just 6 stolen bases. So I feel it was a good move to move on from Mr. Frelick. Another one of our longtime pitching aces, Trevor Rogers. Looks like he's in AAA right now. He's wrecked physically at this point, even though he's only 35 years old. Actually was somewhat effective with the Dodgers in 4 games, 3.52 ERA. And Seattle the year before put up a 2.98 ERA in 45 and a third innings. Looks like he was either cut by Houston or traded to Seattle. But he has just had a tough time staying healthy. You can see the minimal amount of innings he's pitched in some of these recent seasons. So probably wise that we moved on from him, although he's a minor league free agent at this point, so he's not still clipping a huge contract anymore. Someone who probably is still getting a big money is our former closer, Austin Roberts, who's now with the Braves, and you can see he's led the league in saves 2 of the last 3 years, 2.01 ERA, 98 strikeouts, and 71 and 2/3, so still a very effective reliever, but making a lot of money, although honestly, $11.4 million, I think we'd probably be willing to pay him that at this point. When he first left us, he was looking for in the $15 million area, and our budget was even smaller than it is today, and we felt that was a luxury that we probably couldn't afford. Shi Tong Kin is a player who we signed as an international free agent, and he just burst on the scene with us for a couple years, and then his ratings just went completely in the tank. We had signed him to a long-term contract, and we're fortunate that we were able to get out from it, because this would be a crippling contract for a team like Kansas City to have. And it's just staggering. He was so good those first 2 seasons with us, 142 and 134 OPS pluses, and then he just came back at the age of 24, and his ratings all just went in the tank. And you can see the highest batting average he's had since 2030 in any of his stints was 234 and 431 at-bats with the Rockies last year. So his career has not materialized the way that would have hoped. Vinny Tomei, one of the top prospects in baseball, and we had to trade him away last year after Dylan Cruz got hurt to bring on Guerrero as a corner outfielder for 1 year. He still looks like he can become a very good hitting prospect. You can see he's split last year between A and AA, combined for 18 homers, hit 368 in Class A, 301 in AA. There's no doubt in our mind, even when we traded him, that he was going to potentially be a very good major league hitter. Doesn't really have a position to play in the field, and doesn't have a lot of great intangibles in terms of speed, base running, sacrifice bunts. He is durable, so he's going to be able to play probably 160 games a year as a DH for somebody. The goal bringing Guerrero on to replace Cruz was to try to repeat as World Series champions last year. Obviously, we failed in that. So in retrospect, you tell yourself, well, maybe we shouldn't have traded Tomei away. But I think it was a gamble we took, and we tried to make a run at it. And one last player that I've thought about a little bit recently is Stephen Paulini. Was a big-time player for us for a few years. He's now 32 years old, playing in the International League, so playing in AAA. Doesn't look like he's spent too much time in the majors since he left us after the 2029 season. Had 286 at-bats with St. Louis in 2030, 42 major league at-bats with the Brewers in 2031, and that was his last major league appearance when he hit .095 in those 42 at-bats. So Paulini has not done much since we moved on from him. So thought it would be interesting to just kind of dig through a couple of these former players from the Royals who we have moved on from in recent years, and let you all know what had kind of materialized in terms of their careers. And some of them have been pretty productive, and some of them I'm glad we've moved on from. And one other thing I want to try to do before the season begins is make an offer to Angelo Velasquez, the young center fielder. Can see profiles as an above average, potential borderline gold glove type center fielder. Great personality with that captain personality, good leadership, loyalty, and work ethic. And a pretty good contact hitter, doesn't strike out, doesn't hit for much power, has a little bit of speed, but he has not been particularly effective as a base runner. But, he's now been up for over 2 years in the majors, has 1,100 at-bats, 307 hitter, 110 OPS plus, 109 WRC plus, has put up a 7.8 WAR over those couple years, and won a batting title for us back in 2031. He was our number one draft pick back in 2028, quickly made it to the major leagues, and I don't think he's ever going to be a great offensive player, but if he can kind of continue putting up, 110-ish areas, OPS pluses and WRC pluses with that kind of glove and a 300-ish batting average, he's still a pretty useful player to have. So he's also not looking for an incredible contract at this point. He's looking for 8 years with an average of $10.5 million, and he's willing to put team options at the end. And his arbitration numbers are likely to be bigger than this. So I think, he's looking for 4.2, 7.2, and 10 the next few years. Just looking at his arbitration expectations are 4.8, 8.9, and 11 right now. So it seems like he's being pretty reasonable with what he's looking for. I'm going to try to lock up Velasquez for the long term right now. So I've constructed a deal for Velasquez that's a little less than what he's looking for. He was looking for about $10.5 million a year for 8 years. We're offering him almost $9.8 million a year average for 8 years. We offered him a little more these first couple years, and then a little less in the later years of the contract. Buyout's not quite as big as he was looking for in those option years, but if we can kind of have him locked up for the next 9 seasons, really, since this year hasn't even started yet, taking him into his early 30s, at an average annual value of less than $10 million a year for a 24-year-old player who's an excellent defensive player, already won a batting title, already been an all-star, already won a World Series, and is a great presence in the clubhouse. I think we have to do it, and I think there's a chance that he'll accept this. Ooh. He wants a little more in terms of the salary. That's interesting. So I'll try to reconstruct something. I definitely don't want to do only a 5-year deal. I'd like to get it back to 8 years, and we'll up the amount we're offering him a little bit. All right, we're back to 8 years with Velasquez and offering him $10.25 million a year. He had gone down to $10.22 million a year, so this is within about $300,000 a year of what he was originally looking for. Probably should have just taken that original deal, but always trying to save as much money as possible. But he's willing to think about this offer. So again, if we can get him locked up for a little over $10 million a year for the next 8 years, I think that's a good deal for our team. So we are going to get that offer out to Velasquez. And then the last thing before we actually begin the season is going back to kind of where we were when we started. And Jae-Yong Jang. I think the reason our waiver claim was originally denied, and it's possible that another team will claim him, but we don't have enough money to take that contract on right now. So there is a part of me that looking at our team is like, who can we dump who's a little bit overpaid that we don't necessarily have to have? There's certainly pitchers, Mackenzie Gore, Bryce Hubbard, Easton Tumis even to some extent. But then among the everyday players, Ricardo Cabrera making $2.3 million is our backup utility infielder. If you remember from previous episodes, we still have another good young middle infielder who ended up at AAA this year in Willie Flores, who needs a little more development, but could certainly, he's going to be on the team next year. I think without a doubt it's Cabrera's final year with the team, unless Lazioli, Alvarado, Fonseca, and unless those guys just end up total disasters, and then Flores is also, not really a useful player. We've got Vasquez at first base, we've got Bobby Witt Jr. at third base, and those other four guys are potentially our infielders next year. So do we just trade away Cabrera now to open up the kind of money to potentially bring on that pitcher through waivers? I don't like the low work ethic of Cabrera. He was kind of one of the initial moves we made. We've been playing this sim since the 2022 season, and he was a guy that we picked up early in that sim when we were doing our kind of initial revamping of the Kansas City roster. And he was one of the key players that we got back when we traded Salvador Perez to the Yankees 11 seasons ago. So he's one of the kind of OG Kansas City Royals of this playthrough. And he's been an effective major league player, not a great hitter, and he's kind of trending in a negative direction. But a very versatile defensive player, can play second, third, and short, can play all those positions effectively. None of them great, but certainly an above-average second baseman, an above-average third baseman, kind of the minimum level that you'd really want to be playing at a shortstop, but he can certainly play that position and has played that position. But he's probably, going to be lucky to get 200 at-bats this year. So we're going to at least see what the market is like for him. And again, I don't think there's any guarantees, given that we were a playoff team last season, that we're going to get the pitcher that Boston's letting go. But I want to at least see what the options look like if we want to shop Cabrera around. And there's a lot of offers out there. Well, not a ton, but there's offers out there. So I'm going to spend a little time looking through these offers, see if maybe we can send Cabrera somewhere, open up a little bit more money. If we can use it on the Boston pitcher, great. If we don't end up getting him in waivers, then it'll just give us a little more money to take on some contracts when we get closer to the trade deadline. And I do have a deal for Cabrera with the Cardinals for third baseman Billy Dominguez. He's a 24-year-old, actually similar to Cabrera in that he can play second, third, and short. He's not as good defensively, also not great personality, kind of greedy and not the best leader. Looks like he could hit a little bit at the major league level. Doesn't have a lot of power, but looks like he can at least make decent contact. He's in Double-A right now, 2 option years left. I think Cabrera is certainly a better player this year, but as I've talked about, Cabrera is not in our long-term plans. I'm really intrigued by that pitcher that the Red Sox waived. And if you remember from the last episode, one of our final cuts was sending down Juan Palomares, who has been basically a 300 hitter for us at the major league level. He doesn't have a lot of pop. He doesn't have a lot of speed. But guys who, are 299 career hitters in their mid-20s in, significant playing action at the major league level still have some value. So I think I'm going to make this trade. Bring Dominguez on board. And what that will let us do is that will let us put Palomares back up on the major league roster where he's going to kind of be a utility infielder for us. Don't think that should change any of the lineups. Actually, it does take Rich Alvarado out, which is not optimal. I wanted to get Alvarado some playing time at first base. So I think I'm actually going to overrule, and you can see Palomares here at 309 in 2031, 292 last year. only 26 years old. Feel like that bat and that personality are kind of better for us as a bench player than the low work ethic we were getting from Ricardo Cabrera. So Alvarado is going to kind of, at least for the near term, move into more of a pure utility role, which probably is not optimal for a young guy who's 24 years old, number 96 prospect in baseball. But I'll see how many at-bats he's getting. And now, as I talked about, now we have 9 players on our roster. 9 of our 13 everyday players are making the major league minimum this year. So it is definitely a youth movement here by these Kansas City Royals. But what that does now is we've got enough money for free agents that we can potentially take on this contract if we're able to make this claim for Jae-Young Jang. So let's see whether or not money was the issue. Okay, the claim has been accepted now, which is positive. So money was the issue. There is obviously still a chance that someone else with a lower record that's higher in the priority will claim him instead of us. But just a really weird cut by the Red Sox. But as I mentioned, the Red Sox were in the World Series last year. They're a loaded team. But hopefully their loss will be our gain. And now, with the claim in for Jae-Young Jang, the extension offer made to Velasquez, one last thing. Let's see the predictions before the season starts. And even with the youth movement and the lack of free agent activity, expectations are going to be high for the Royals. The Sim was a 101-61 record for Kansas City. Big years from Vasquez and Bobby Witt Jr. and Ben Borgman. We'll see how the season goes, but at least through this simulation, the young Royals who really didn't do too much in free agency and are going with the youth movement and awful lot of minimum salary players, particularly in the everyday lineup, projected to have a big year. Let's hope that that's what happens. And unfortunately, our waiver claim of Jae-Young Jang didn't go through. Looks like the Baltimore Orioles picked him up. So it was really weird to see a pitcher that good going through. I honestly don't think we were going to use him in the rotation. I think he would have been really deadly out of the bullpen. And I'm pretty happy with our rotation, although with Jacobs on the IL right now, certainly could argue that he could have stepped right into our rotation. So I guess theoretically we may have weakened the team a tiny, tiny bit for this year by having Palomares up instead of Ricardo Cabrera. But I do like Palomares' personality better, and Cabrera was not in our long-term plans. This was going to be his last year with us. You may remember that I hemmed and hawed a little bit about whether we wanted to even bring him back for that $2.3 million arbitration number that we were able to sign him for. So we may have weakened ourselves a little tiny bit over the near term, but now we've got some extra money to potentially deploy to wherever our areas of weakness are when we get closer to the trade deadline. So I'm not going to bemoan that Ricardo Cabrera is leaving us about 6 or 7 months earlier than he would have in a perfect world. And in these early days of the season, the Royals off to a solid 5-3 start, but the pitching staff's getting banged up. Jacobs is now healthy. As you know, we put him on the IL to be really conservative. Bryce Hubbard now out with a herniated disc for 2 to 3 months, so he's obviously going to go on to the IL. Gordon Graceffo banged up with a strained forearm that has a moderate impact on his throwing. He's going to be banged up for a week. We are just going to try to bench him so we don't have to put him on the IL for an extended period of time. Still need to bring up another pitcher now. Definitely getting a little bit short of short of everything. It would have been really good if we could have brought on that pitcher from the Red Sox, but obviously a lot of other people thought he looked interesting also. Yeifer Perdomo back up to the majors. Let's see what Nichols wants the staff and the bullpen to look like. Hopefully we can get through the next few days, skip over Graceffo or push back Graceffo in the rotation a little bit and piece things together until hopefully Zach Jacobs is ready to come back in 5 days, because all the rest of the pitchers are out for a while. Although I guess Jaden Woods could be back in a week, but he's a borderline roster player anyways. We'll have to see how Perdomo and Heisel Barrow are doing. Looks like Barrow's done okay in a couple of appearances so far, but he'll be fighting with those guys for kind of the 12th and 13th spots on the roster when he's healthy. And a piece of good news, we did get Angelo Velasquez signed to that contract, so slight bump in fan interest. He's going to be together $82 million for the next 8 years plus this whole season. Only hitting .240 this year, but obviously it's early going, and expect that batting average from him to be much higher, not in the not so distant future. And finally getting some injuries to the everyday players. The rookie outfielder Ishmael Zavala out for 6 weeks with back spasms, so that's not optimal. Wasn't hitting too much, a 176 average in his first 34 at-bats at the major league level. So a little bit of bummer that his season is going to be fractured by being out for the next month and a half, but it is what it is. And with that injury to Zavala, I think it's Willie Flores' chance to get back to the majors. Only had one game in Omaha, got a hit in that one game. He still has some work to do as far as his development, but love the personality, love the defensive versatility. We kind of need someone who can play the outfield right now, and honestly, I think he'll get some playing time as a backup infielder also. I guess it's conceivable that he steps right into the starting shortstop role over Fonseca also, so was going to try to keep him down as long as possible. He may be back down soon, but with the injury, kind of need a guy who can play the outfield, and none of the outfielders that we have in AAA are really long-term answers for us, except for possibly Victor Avellar, but he's still probably a year away. He's got more development to do also. Did have 2 hits, including a home run in his first AAA action, but he's literally played 1 game at the AAA level. So over the near term, we're going to bring Flores up, see what that does to the lineup. And Fonseca still the starter, so Willie Flores a backup, but I think he'll get some decent playing time, hopefully, as a utility infielder and a backup outfielder. And even though we were cautious with that day-to-day injury from Zach Jacobs, he came back, pitched 1 game, no runs over 6 innings today, and now he's out with an oblique strain for 2 weeks. So as much as we tried to be conservative with him, the injuries are definitely building up with the pitching staff. That will mean that Heisel Barrow, who we just sent down to make room for Jacobs, we still have Heisel Barrow up. Yeifer Perdomo, who we just sent down after having him up very briefly, will be back up on the major league team for the near term. And although we've been banged up by a lot of injuries, great start for the Royals, 13-3, obviously in first place, and number 1 in the power rankings as of this week. So Royals off to a fast start despite the injury issues that we've had so far. But the injuries continue to add up. We are 15-5, so playing well. But Dylan Cruz now out with a torn abdominal muscle for 5 weeks. So after missing all of his first year with us, he's now going to miss some significant time here in 2033. He's been everything we would have hoped, though. 300 batting average and 7 homers in his first 70 at-bats with the Royals. So he has been a very important part of our offense. Hopefully, he won't be on the IL for any longer than the 5 weeks or so that he's expected to be. But that definitely leaves another hole in the outfield. Presumably Flores or Nazir Muley will have to get some playing time now. Actually, no. Who are we playing in the outfield? Marin, Alvarado DHing, interesting. Vasquez and Velasquez. Okay, so Vasquez has moved into left, Palomares at first, and Alvarado at DH. And then against righties, it's Vasquez, Marin, and Velasquez, of course. So doing everything possible to avoid playing Flores and Muley. Flores has gotten some playing time, though, and hitting 400 in those 15 at-bats. So hopefully we can continue to have him see a little action. Now we just need to decide who we're going to bring up to fill that roster spot. I was thinking about Aiden Harris, but he's not hitting too much at all. Orlando Soto is a prospect who's actually kind of similar to Velasquez. Having him in the system made me think about maybe not signing Velasquez to that deal we just did, but Velasquez is better defensively, and they have very similar offensive profiles, but I think Velasquez is a little bit better in terms of his contact and gap power. Orlando Soto, definitely a better base runner, and he is hitting 342. So I think we're not going to force start Soto at the major league level. But let's take a look and see what he can do over the next few weeks. Wonder if that will change the lineups at all. Nope. So Soto and Flores, two of the youngsters, are on the IL. But now that with the addition of Flores and Soto, that makes it 7 rookies on the Royals this year. Obviously, one of them in Zavala is now on the IL, but the youth movement seems to be paying off so far with that 15-5 record. And while the early injuries this season were all our pitching staff, our outfield continues to be decimated. Angelo Velasquez, the young center fielder that we just signed to a long-term extension, out for 5 weeks with a sprained ankle. You can see he has started to hit. He's got his batting average up to 311, so he's performing as we would hope. But going to be a definite bummer to lose him for the next month plus, because right now that leaves us with 3 of our 4, kind of primary outfielders on the IL. The other one in the mix is Junior Marin, but Cruz and Velasquez are both pure full-time starters, and Zavala was kind of an everyday starter, even though he's a rookie. So team is definitely banged up. We have Sandy Gaston now on a rehab assignment, and Zach Jacobs did come back from that injury and pitched reasonably well in his second start of the year. So hopefully things can start to stabilize a little bit with the injuries. But you can see in the outfield, particularly right now, we're going to be running thin for another several weeks. And we've made it to May 1st. The first full month of the season is in the books. Incredible start for the Royals, 25-10, obviously in first place. Alex Vasquez, huge month, batter of the month, 351 with 7 homers, 24 ribbies, and a 425 on-base percentage in the month of April. So things are going well so far. Looking at the standings in a little more depth. Only up by 3.5 on Minnesota, who also have a pretty good record, the 3rd best record in the American League, or the 4th best record in the American League with that .618 winning percentage. But couldn't hope for a better start to the season as far as the record for the Royals, particularly with such a young team and particularly with some of the injuries that we've had. You can see Ben Borgman having another good season, tied for the league lead in wins with 5, second with a 2.35 ERA right now. So he is off to a good start. Before we finish up the episode, we'll just check in on a few of the many rookies on the team to see how all of the youngsters are faring in their first major league action. So Leo Aguilar, the backup catcher, has hit way better than we would have expected. A 312 batting average in 32 at-bats. Obviously a small sample size, and when you look at his batting profile, certainly don't expect him to continue hitting that way. But with that 70 catcher ability, he's got 4 home runs in those 32 at-bats. Definitely has been a lot more productive than expected, but certainly putting up numbers offensively and with that catcher ability that make us very happy to have him as a backup catcher. Angelo Bolden, the starter, still hitting well, though, 287 batting average this year, so he is doing his best to hold off the youngster, which we think he will. Rich Alvarado hit pretty well so far. He's only started 20 games out of the 35 that we've played, but hitting 282 and 78 at-bats. So he's kind of continued the good offensive performance for the number 96 prospect in baseball that he first displayed when he was up for a cup of coffee last September. Aragetto Laziosi, hitting 286 as our everyday second baseman, has played 32 games. Not a ton of power, but does have 10 doubles, 110 OPS plus, 109 WRC plus. With that glove, if he's a productive offensive player too, would view that as a big win. Willie Flores is just raking, 429 batting average, only 42 at-bats. He's not playing every day. I think he is a player, when we have more people healthy, that I was thinking we would send down to AAA for a little more seasoning, but it's going to be hard to send a guy who's hitting 429 with a 241 OPS plus down to AAA if that time comes. Tony Fonseca, if he can hit 275, you look at those defensive ratings, he is the best defensive player we have out of all of these young prospects. He is probably the weakest offensive prospect. I did not think he was going to be hitting anywhere near 275, but if he can be a 275 hitter at the major league level, even if he doesn't have much power, and even if his OPS plus and WRC plus remain in the low to mid 70s, he's still going to be a pretty valuable player with that glove. So he is doing well also. And then Orlando Soto, brought him up recently, and he's raking also, a 438 batting average in his first 32 major league at-bats. So the youngsters have been a huge part of this great start by the Royals, and we'll see if they can continue to take the baseball world by storm in our next episode when we get into the month of May. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.